You know that feeling when you're hit with a wave of nostalgia for a childhood toy? That one thing you absolutely loved? Well, today, we're talking about someone who took that feeling to a whole new level. He didn't just want to buy a replacement for his old glow-in-the-dark dinosaur. No, he decided to recreate it entirely from scratch. And I mean from scratch, starting with the raw chemicals. So it all started right here. A super relatable moment, right? That sinking feeling when you realize a favorite piece of your childhood is just gone. But instead of just hitting up eBay, this sparked something much, much bigger. A genuine scientific quest. And just like that, the quest was on. But the goal wasn't just to make the toy, it was to create the very powder that gives it that magical glow. Now, if you look it up, the chemistry seems almost laughably simple. You take some zinc, you take some sulfur, you heat them up, and voila, you should get zinc sulfide. Looks like a super easy recipe to bring a memory back to life. But as you're about to find out, chemistry is almost never that simple. This is where that simple, elegant plan on paper meets a very, very messy reality. The first try at making the powder by just burning the elements together, well, it didn't just fail, it failed spectacularly. And here's the perfect picture of that failure. The expectation was this beautiful, pure white powder. The reality? A nasty, dark, contaminated gunk that literally sprayed all over the place during the reaction. Yeah, not exactly the magical stardust he was going for. And the most important part? After all that fire and mess, the powder was completely dead. Even after he added a bit of copper, which is supposed to be the activator that makes it glow, there was nothing, not a flicker. A total and complete bust. So what on earth went wrong? Well, it all comes down to a process called phosphorescence. See, for something to glow in the dark, its crystal structure has to be absolutely perfect. It needs to be able to grab onto light energy and then let it go, nice and slow. Turns out pure zinc sulfide just isn't cut out for that job all by itself. And this was the big breakthrough. The problem wasn't the basic ingredients, it was contamination. Phosphorescence, it turns out, is an incredibly sensitive process. Even the tiniest amounts of impurities, we're talking parts per million, especially metals like iron, can totally wreck the crystal structure and just kill the glow. Dead. That realization changed the entire game. The new mission wasn't about finding a better reaction. It was about a long, difficult, relentless pursuit of absolute purity. And the new process was way, way more complicated. First up, he used an oxidizer to basically force contaminants like iron to become solid so he could filter them out. Next, he used zinc powder itself to literally pull a whole different set of impurities out of the mix. And finally, the really sketchy part. Bubbling toxic hydrogen sulfide gas through what's left to force the super pure zinc sulfide to precipitate out as a clean white solid. So after all that, the grand total yield was just 15.5 grams. And you might be thinking, that's it? But here's the secret. That tiny number means it worked. He could have made about 68 grams. But the whole process was designed to throw away most of the material just to get a small amount that was exceptionally, unbelievably pure. Okay, so we have our ultra-pure zinc sulfide. But guess what? It still won't glow. There's one final, incredibly delicate step. You have to dope it. That means infusing an absurdly small, perfectly controlled amount of another metal, in this case copper, right into the crystal structure itself. And of course, getting that doping just right meant more trial and error. The first try, using a chemical called a flux, gave a really weak glow that faded in about a minute. The second try, without the flux and with more even heat, was definitely better, brighter, and lasted longer. But the third attempt was the charm. He cut the heating time in half, and that was the sweet spot. It produced the brightest, longest-lasting glow of them all. So the recipe was finally perfected. It was time for the main event. He took his entire precious 15.5-gram batch of pure powder and applied the winning method. After more than a month of painstaking, often frustrating work, this was it, the moment of truth. And it worked. It actually worked. The final result was a batch of power with a beautiful, classic bright green glow. It might not be professional grade, but for something made in a home lab through sheer grit, this was a huge, huge win. So the science was finally done.
The magical glowing powder was real. Now there was just one thing left to do. Close the loop and turn this dust back into the toy that started this whole crazy journey. The last part was actually pretty straightforward. You just mix that precious powder into some epoxy resin and pour it into molds. He had the dinosaur mold, of course, to fulfill the original mission, and for reasons I can't quite explain, he also had this, well, it's a creepy baby mold, apparently for cake decorating. Why not? After letting them cure overnight, there they were, the final toys. And they worked perfectly. You charge them up with a light, and they put out this steady, clear glow for several minutes. A perfect recreation of that childhood magic. Mission accomplished. You know, this whole project is just a fantastic window into the incredibly finicky science behind something we kind of take for granted. But it's also a cool reminder that this nostalgic old tech has actually come a long, long way. See, the zinc sulfide he made is the classic stuff, so it was in all the old glow-in-the-dark toys. But modern glow products, they often use a totally different compound called strontium aluminate. It's pricier and trickier to make, but it can glow up to 10 times brighter and for 10 times longer than the old stuff. And that kind of brings us to the final question, doesn't it? Why? Why go through over a month of difficult, complicated, and sometimes dangerous chemistry to create something that's frankly not as good as what you can buy online for a couple of bucks? Well, maybe the point was never just to have the glowing dinosaur. Maybe the point was to finally understand the magic that made it glow in the first place.